You did. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, when I graduated high school, I was 17. I didn't, I knew I was going to go into the military, right? When I was about a junior. So I knew I was going to the Air Force. 2 days after I graduated high school, I left. Um, I had a girlfriend, my best friend. They didn't want me to go. They said, you should go to college, don't go into the Air Force, all that kind of stuff. But I knew what I was going to do, right? So they said I'd be best at like loading and unloading airplanes. So I was a load master on a cargo plane called the C-141. And I think the most I got out of the military was, well, first of all, they introduced me to logistics, right? How to load, because now I've loaded trucks, I've loaded rail cars, I've loaded and unloaded everything, right? But in the Air Force, that was the first introduction to logistics. And the important thing about that, or how it shaped me, was everything's done by a standard operating procedure. There's always a guide, right, that tells you in the military you have to do it this way. And it's not like they don't know what they're doing, right? They've been in the military's been running for hundreds of years, right? And so they write this because this is the way you're supposed to do things. So I think today in logistics, logistics companies need to have a standard operating procedure that all their employees follow, right? So that they do business the way they do. And that's what the military, I think, taught me the most was, here's the way to do it. This is how you're going to do it. We've tested it thousands of times. Don't try it a different way, because this is the way you do it. And so I think that's a benefit to logistics companies, to have military people or people who have that background, who've been told, here's a manual, follow the manual, and you'll do fine. I think that works in logistics too. Yeah, it was just one of those things. When I got out of the service, I went to college. But even when I was in college, every job I got hired for was some kind of logistics, transportation, warehousing, distribution, loading, unloading trucks or whatever. I prefer. I mean, I know running a company takes a certain skill set, but also I'd rather be physically working. I guess that's just the kind of person I am. I'd love to go out in the warehouse and unload a truck, or I still work to this day doing stuff, even though I have employees that can do it. But I just like the physical work. It's, I don't go to the gym and work out, but every day I can lift up, a 300-400 pounds stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And I use the actual work to kind of keep me in shape, right? So it's good that we physically do things. I mean, I have a brokerage and I have a carrier. The carrier side actually handles the freight and all that. I like that part of the business better than the broker's business. You know what I mean? So that's just, I guess that's just the person I am. So, it is what it is. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, I was a shipper. So when I got out of college, I actually got jobs with shippers. I actually worked for Elizabeth Arden, which is a cosmetics company, worldwide cosmetic company, and ran their distribution and transportation, and really, really loved doing that, being on the shipper side. Then I was at an audio electronics manufacturing firm called Rockford Fosgate, or Rockford Corporation, and I ran distribution there. And then finally, I worked as a VMI for Lowe's. So half of my career has been spent on the shipper side, buying transportation, right? So most of my connections in transportation came because I bought millions of dollars worth of freight, right? As a shipper. But then when I left doing VMI for Lowe's, I decided to start my own company. And I had worked in selling some TMS software. I'd worked in brokerage. I'd worked as a carrier for a short time. So I had all three of those things kind of together before I started my business. So, but the first thing I did start was a brokerage. And I didn't have a warehouse. I didn't do anything on the asset side. I basically did brokerage. And it was just one of those things that it came to me. It was almost forced to me, right? I mean, I had spent millions of dollars with multiple companies when I was shipping for Lowe's, right? Or I do a lot of business for Lowe's. So I had all the carriers come to me and say, I know you don't have any customers, you don't have any revenue, but here's our discount that I gave you when you were at Lowe's, because you don't get that these days. I have to backtrack a little bit. Back in 2012, I mean, you could have a freight rep give you a large tariff discount and shake your hand and say, thank you for all the business. I know you don't have anything, and give you a large credit line. I mean, most brokers can't walk into that situation anymore. You got to fill out credit apps. You got to do all those things. It's not just a handshake anymore. So if you go back over a decade, I mean, business was operated like that. And I was fortunate enough to have all those connections. And even though I have zero customers and $0 come in the door, I was getting the same discounting as the large enterprise shippers, right? So I used those to resell those rates, especially LTL rates, to other customers. And that's kind of how I started. And I worked from my house. I did like what a typical broker would do, right? And then I noticed that a lot of my brokerage friends would say, hey, you know anybody who can crate this up or pack it or palletize it so that I can move it? I mean, right now it's just sitting there and I can't move it because it's not on a pallet. So then I decided to start, because when I was in college, I worked for a crate and freight company, right? So I would build crates and I learned how to package and all that while I was in college. And a little after that, I worked for a year or so at that company after I got out of college. Even though I had my degree and I could move into something else, I was still physically working and making crates and packing stuff, right? So that stuff came in handy and then basically I was almost forced into that, right? I had so many customers who were like, I need a crate, I need this palletized, I need this stuff set up. So then I started, Gateway Optimum Transportation with some box trucks and cargo vans. And, so now all of a sudden I'm running a brokerage and a carrier side, right? So, and then got a warehouse and got another warehouse and got another warehouse. So well, I have to say, it probably affected my career the most. It was the timing was perfect. Everything was good. It was the early 90s. I worked at Rockford, and basically the company came to me and says, Steve, you're doing a wonderful job with distribution. We're going to give you the largest office in the company. And I was like, man, this sounds great. And they go, but we're going to put four programmers in that room with you. So I didn't really get the largest office. And they were like, and this is the early 90s. There weren't, I don't know of any TMSs like they are today, right? There's tons of them today, but back then there weren't many. And really, we created so we were an Oracle company. Our ERP ran on Oracle. Our accounting was Oracle, all that kind of stuff. So they sent me to Oracle University for 6 months, right? I went to San Jose and sat in classes learning every module there is in Oracle so that we could design the stuff in SQL databases outside of Oracle to do the work Oracle wasn't doing well. So it had like a transportation module. It just didn't handle things well. It didn't like capture serial numbers of the amplifiers we were shipping. It wouldn't make a pallet label. It wouldn't make a UPS label, all that kind of stuff, right? Or it wouldn't make a LTL freight label. It wouldn't make a trucking label. I mean, so we had to sit down and from scratch build an entire transportation management system. And, back in those days, a lot of people laugh, but back in those days, an LTL carrier like YRC, it was Consolidated Freightways, Watkins. I mean, some of these ones aren't in business anymore, right? But they'd have stacks of, floppy disks they would bring to me, and I'd download all the zips and the rates into the table. And then we would be able to rate and know exactly what that was going to be before it went out the door. And we captured a lot of like WMS stuff in that program, TMS stuff. I mean, we rated on pallets, we rated on zip zones, we rated on boxes. We did all parcel, LTL, truckload. That TMS managed all that stuff, and it was very. I spent years helping develop that. Eventually, nowadays you don't sell source code, but we eventually sold that source code to another company that used it to make it TMS. But it was a amazing experience. I mean, I didn't know a lot about programming. I mean, computers were just coming up in the late 80s, early 90s. I had done a little bit in college, but these programmers were absolutely amazing. They listened to me talk about freight and how transportation works and all that stuff and how to design the TMS. But then I listened to them how to program. I became a programmer. I could, what we were developing in SQL in SQL, I could run any query or write different queries to get the data that I needed out of that. Because as an enterprise shipper, you're shipping a lot of stuff, right? And it's amazing that experience because we designed that system, we used it. All the carriers even were like, "Wow, this is amazing what you guys are doing," right? And I remember I get a knock on the door and they're like, "Hey, you got a visitor?" And I'm like, "Who is it?" And they say, "Oh, it's UPS." And I think it's a sales guy, but instead it was an IT guy who came in and said, "Steve, you need to stop doing this." But we had designed the TMS so that uh, basically every night at about 2 o'clock in the morning, it would go out and scrape the UPS website with every one of our tracking numbers. It would go out and put it in, return it, bring the data into our database, and it'd do that at 2 o'clock, thousands of tracking numbers. And they came to me and said, "Can you stop doing that, please? You're bringing down our website." And so they end up giving us a backdoor or a LAN connection so that we could get all our tracking information through the back, but they were pretty mad at us that we were scraping their website every night to get tracking information. And they're like, "You can't do that anymore." So, you know, but that was in the early days. I mean, like I said, everything was on floppy disks and no APIs and just, so it was a great experience. Well, man, there is so many different things. Like we worked with like Walmart and Best Buy and all that kind of stuff, and the biggest thing I took out of that was, and what most people don't realize in logistics world, is it's more than just the freight. There's a lot of things behind it. Like, for example, when I was at Rockford, the first Fast and Furious movie came out, and we were the official speakers, amplifier, headset for the vehicles in that movie, right? So we came out with a blister pack set of stuff that people can buy at Walmart or Best Buy, right? And the manufacturing was done overseas. Okay, so they were running behind, and most retailers have a fee or a price. So, for example, Walmart and Best Buy did huge ads in the newspaper that cost them millions of dollars about our product. But if the product's not on their shelves at the time that they've run all these ads, then you get fined. You have to pay them because your product's not in their store, right? So we ran into that, and it's like, "Hey, you know, the big guys called me in and said, 'Steve, what can you do to expedite these things?'" And I'd been in shipping for a long time by then, but I had never chartered an airplane before, and I started chartering airplanes, right? So I had to get airplanes full of product to leave China to get over to the U.S. so that all the product could in the Best Buy stores before that. And a lot of people don't realize it's more than just a transportation. I mean, if that stuff wasn't on the shelves, our company was going to be fined, or they would demand millions of dollars from us because they had spent that and didn't have any product, right? So a lot of times you got to keep that stuff in mind about how the larger retailers work, and if their shelves aren't full or whatever, companies pay for that, and all of a sudden your price has to go up on what you're buying because they have to pay for shelf space they haven't fulfilled. So transportation is a very important aspect of every supply chain, right? I mean, me switching all my ocean containers, think about the change of cost in that too. All that stuff was supposed to move ocean container, but because they fell behind, I had to charter 767 airplanes to bring all this stuff over, right? Um, so it's amazing to work with those people like that. There's a lot of things you have to um, make your system work with their system. For example, our TMS system that we designed, we obviously had to have EDI capabilities, and back then there weren't a lot of companies out there that provided like an attachment or an app or anything you could use to send these EDI transaction sets. We had to come up with the code and make the EDI transaction sets work with what Walmart and Best Buy was giving us, right? So those are the kind of things that transportation or 3PLs have to keep in mind, that shippers and retailers and stuff are going through, when you're trying to fulfill some kind of distribution. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and the thing is in our position, or in as a logistics service provider, we have a lot of different other departments that we have to speak to. You have to speak to the CFO or the finance accounting department about rates. You have to speak to procurement, who's buying the stuff for the company, about timing, right? And so there's a lot of different parts that logistics have to work with at that company. Or even in the case that I gave you just now, I mean, we had to work with marketing, right? Had to make sure that the advertisements for Walmart and Best Buy were out at a certain time, and that the product was on the shelves on the date that the sale was supposed to happen, right? So I mean, you're working with a lot of different, 3PLs and transportation and brokers. We're working with a lot of different departments to make something happen, right? So, yeah, I love that because being a veteran, I'm proud of being a veteran, and then I employ a lot of veterans. We have a government contract that we do nationwide, and that program, at one point I had 19 employees, and 17 out of those 19 were veterans, right? And they're very good at what they do because I can send them out on the road, which we deliver in all 50 states. One of my employees and our equipment have to deliver these under the government contract in all 50 states, right? So they travel a lot, they're on the road. But being in the military, you know what it is to be deployed, right? If you get sent over to Afghanistan or Kuwait or wherever you're going, you're used to being deployed. So my employees that have worked on that contract over the years, um, they're very good at it because they understand, hey, I'm on the road for 2 months. I'll be going through the Southeast, Florida, all the way up to Virginia, and then I'll get to come home for a couple of weeks, and then bam, back out on the road to do some more, right? So they're used to being deployed, and they're used to doing hard work like that. So they're very good to employ because, like I said, they've been in the military, they've been handed the manual, they understand what the standard operating procedures are, or they understand the scope of work, right? Because it's been written and they've read it a number of times and they know it like the back of their hand. Yeah, it's not all roses with these guys though. They'll come back and complain about each other, but you know what I mean. But I think the military guys, any veteran looking for a job, deserves. For my guys especially. So I have a few guys who were in war battle areas where they lost somebody, and some of them suffer from PTSD or whatever, and they've come out and they've gotten out of the service, and my job really reconnects them with some of those people, right? They go out and they'll meet. I mean, I've had some of my employees run into people that they were in Afghanistan with, right? And they're like, wow, this is great. And it makes them, even though they're out of the service, they feel reconnected to the service because they're doing a service for our government contract serves the military, so they run into people that they've served with before, and it really makes them feel good. It reconnects them to the military even though they're not in anymore, right? So pretty neat. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I get it. Yeah, I mean, coming from where you come from, your perspective is really important because, again, if you're involved in that and you've seen it before, you understand how it affects people. So I totally get it. Well, I'm real busy with my companies, but I did take the time to start up a logistics club here in Phoenix, Transportation Logistics Club of Phoenix. I've volunteered to be the president of that, right? And so we are working because I really want to give back. Obviously, I've spent 40 years in logistics, right? I'd love to give back and give scholarships to some kids that are interested in logistics and supply chain, raise some money through the community and support the supply chain community here in Phoenix and around the country. I mean, it's an important endeavor. It's an important thing that we do, transportation, and learning it is important. You're always learning. Here I am, 40 years later. I still learn every day, right? We all learn from each other. So I really, I guess the legacy would be just to bring younger people into the fold and get them excited. I mean, there's other more exciting professions, being an actor or an athlete or whatever, but logistics is important. And, I was on a podcast before where I said the most important thing if you're going to start your business, you got to have a passion for it. You got to want to do what you're what you're doing, right? It's like, I don't care if somebody looks down on me and says, "Oh, he's just a delivery guy delivering to me." I feel good because I know I own the company. It's not like, you know, I'm okay with delivering. That's what I do, right? So you got to love what you do and be passionate about what you do to be good at it. So that's my opinion. Holy shocking. That's amazing. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, freight school is just it's on the school platform, and it's allowing, I always think that it's great at like a conference or whatever, that you have a panel of a bunch of, I guess, old people who've been in this for a long time, right? Because you have a different perspective. Because, like I said, logistics now is much different than a decade ago, right? I mean, it changes a lot. But to get the perspective of somebody who's loaded rates, or typed out a bill of lading, loaded rates from a floppy disk, or typed out a full bill of lading, kind of thing is interesting. The younger people need to kind of learn that. But the freight school we put together because a group of us, there's three or four of us who always get DMs from people, younger people, like, how do I do this? What do I do to get this? I want to start a cargo van company, or I want to start a warehouse. What's the first steps? So you get a lot of that, and I get DMs all the time like that. And it's hard to answer everybody, or to talk to everybody, or try to get a connection with everybody. But the Freight School is a platform that allows us to put that information out there and build a community around it, right? So all of us, have been in for quite a while, and we are making content, writing content, putting it on Freight School so that we can answer some of those questions without having to answer a DM. We just go, well, why don't you go to Freight School, and there's a couple classes in there that might help you start out where you're going, or even if you've been in it for a while and you want to learn more. Like I have a class on there on ISPM 15 crating, which is international. All my facilities will have a stamp that allows us to create a crate that can be exported, right? Not everybody can just build a wood box and export it. There's rules and regulations. So I have an entire class on, if you're a warehouse, or you're a shipper, or you're a carrier, and you're interested in crating, then that's a great place to start. It's a great place to go into school. You can access that class and go, well, this is why you do it. This is why you need it. This is how you do it. This is how you get it. And it just explains it in very simple terms. So the freight school is kind of like a mini class for people, and it's really more, right now we're just building the community, trying to get more people involved and chat. It's kind of like LinkedIn, where you can post comments and put gifts on there and do all that kind of stuff. But it's a long thing. It's like decades of us all trying to input and put stuff in. So it's not like a short term thing. It's something we're all dedicated to over a long haul. Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I want it to be entertaining, right? I mean, you post a lot, and your stuff is very good because you let people know how you relate with experience, right? I try to do that, but try to put a little funny twist or make somebody laugh, because that could make somebody's day, right? I've had people say, "Oh man, I laughed when you posted that, and I'm so happy for it." And I think that's why it's popular for people like Freight Caviar and other people to put out those memes about logistics, right? Because people laugh about it. They're like, yeah, I laid in bed last night. And yeah, that's exactly what it is, right? So I'd rather post something where people they learn a little bit, but um, they also, get a little laugh, and it helps their day. Um, we like protecting like artwork or art pieces or things that people value or prize. I mean, we've been fortunate to have people understand that our mission is to not, we're just not a shipper. We want to pack it so that even if it drops off the back of the LTL carrier or drops out of the truck, nothing's going to happen to it, right? So we've done $1 million Picassos, right? So I mean, there's not a lot of people who want to even handle something like that, right? But we feel like our years of experience and all the different employees, that we have the materials and we have the knowledge, and we understand how like even things we ship to an LTL network, we understand that it's going to come off and go back on the truck 3 or 4 times from California to New York, right? It's going to go from LA to Dallas and get offloaded off that truck and put on another trailer that's going to go from there to Cincinnati. And then Cincinnati, it's going to be taken off, put on another trailer. Eventually it gets to New York. So we've been on docks. We know how it's treated. We know how forklift drivers drive, some of the challenges they have, some of the other freight that's in those trucks, right? May not be packaged correctly. It may fall over onto what you have. And so uh, our thing is we want to package something so that, and not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants to pay for a crate to protect something and get all the way across. It's expensive to do that. But if you want something to get across the country, exactly, yeah. And so that most of our like fulfillment clients are in that boat. They went through years or whatever of stuff breaking all the time, and it's their very valuable product, and their customers are upset. And then they just say, listen, just crate everything. I mean, just put everything in a wood box, make sure it's secure, lots of good foam, lots of good packing inside. And, some of those, I've had a customer for 10 years. That's when I walked in their door, they were every other one was getting broke. And now that we crate every one of them, they don't get broke. Now, does it cost them more money and they lose profit? Probably. Yeah. But they have happier customers, right? Every time one arrives, they're happy that it arrived and it's not broke. So that's an important thing. But like I said, some of the artwork is something that somebody prizes. Like even something like a great grandmother passed away and left you her dresser, and you remember that as a little kid, and it's important to you, because that was your grandma's dresser, and she hid the candy in there, whatever the deal is, right? Um, when somebody comes to us with sentimental things like that, it's very important for us to say, listen, we don't want anything to this happen to it. It's been around for 100 years and it's important to you. And they're like, yep, I'll pay whatever it takes to make sure it gets there safely. Right. Those are the kind of things that we want to work with, and a lot of people turn that down. They don't want to work with that. They can't trust the trucking company they're giving it to make sure it doesn't get broke. Right. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate, all you put out there too. I mean, it's obviously you're passionate about the work and you do a great job. And thank you for having me on. I'm glad I'm your bestie. You bet. Thank you. You bet.